Yeah. So please start with your name and your whereabouts and where you are now.
Okay. So my name is Nurith Levi. I live and work in Israel. I'm now in my clinic, which is part of my home, my flat.
Mhm.
So very convenient.
Yes.
And I'm in Israel since the 26th of February, when I realized that the borders between Austria, I was in Vienna for a meeting. I realized that the borders between Austria and Italy were closed. And immediately I was looking for the first flight home.
Mm.
I made it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And is lockdown is still on in Israel, or?
I mean, the borders are still locked. There are hardly any flights going, only commercials, I believe, and first aid and special affairs, which we have a lot. But there is not yet regular civil traffic.
But I mean, like people are not locked down at home. You may actually go out now, yes? Or
We go out, the schools are working, almost everything is open, but not everything came back to life, because many business crashed, and some are insecure to the extent that they are still waiting, because it says that we are at the beginning of the second wave. So probably some people are just waiting for it to be over and start their effort then.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, you started with this, and I wonder, is it, does it, is it still affecting you? I mean, this time of this coronavirus, in what ways, if so?
It is affecting, I would say, indirectly. I didn't suffer at all. Due to my age and being in the, the risk group, I kept the closed down, and I stayed home alone for 8 weeks.
Okay.
But I was working all the time, and I never had a dull moment, because I enjoyed the peace and quiet and no obligation. And in a way, this new rhythm was interesting to explore, and I rather enjoyed it. And I had contact with the external world, so I didn't care. It is more the uncertainty, and more because in our country everything is confused with the political and other all sorts of factors, so that I think the only thing that I really suffer from is a deep feeling of insecurity due to the distrust in authorities. And it was more general in the past. It is now focused also on something very substantial, health, and it hits home. You cannot avoid thinking and weighing how much of the regulations are really in my best interest and how many of them are an abuse of the opportunity to control my daily life, which is a terribly annoying feeling. So this is the way that I am affected. The rest is not important.
Yeah, I can understand. And besides, I mean, I live in Poland, and well, yeah, politics matters, maybe not to such an extent like in Israel, but it's difficult to judge and to wait. But prior to this general election in Poland, so every move the government takes, we wonder if it is for our sake or for their.
Exactly. So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes, yes. Okay, and maybe now to your, I mean, now background, because I am somehow curious about what I see in your in your office. Yes, is this
in the background? You mean?
Yes, those small figures.
Yes,
Wow.
what you see is an informal collection, unintentional collection of miniatures of animals.
Okay.
That I didn't really start it as a collection. I just put together all sorts of, items that I found that were once my children's toys or little souvenirs that people brought me, and it became a collection. And for years now, it is one of my support system and helping hands and tools of my work, because just like you, even from the distance of Poland, you couldn't resist it. Everyone comes in, is looking at it and wants to touch something and has some sort of observation. So I make use of it very often.
Yeah, for sure. I would approach it and they would like to touch
Yes.
it.
Yeah. Some of my patients say, "Oh, this is for kids, I guess." For kids and for bigger kids. So we get into it, and it's.
So this is the place where you work, actually.
Yes. Yes.
And do you now, are you now seeing clients in flesh, face to face?
Yes. Yes. Some of them few of them are still on Zoom for different reasons, but most of them I see in person already. I hope it can continue. I don't know. But, it was an interesting experience, actually, to move completely into Zoom. It was interesting from the diagnostic point of view, who adjusted easily, who resisted, who needed some time to adapt. It was interesting for me to learn how to approach it big scale. So it turns out to be a fruitful time of exploring and learning.
Before getting to Gestalt therapy and Gestalt world per se, I would like to ask you more about you as a person, as a human. Could you say?
As a human. Me as a human.
Yes. What comes to your mind when you think of it?
What comes to my mind? Well, first and foremost, I am a mother of 4 grown children and the grandmother of 9 grandchildren.
How many?
9.
Wow.
4 boys and 5 girls. Yeah. And I think in my identity was and still is, first of all, that of mother and grandmother. I'm a widow since 6 years. So this is another element of my identity. And parallel to that, I would say I'm an Israeli Gestalt therapist.
Okay.
And each of these 3 words stands there in its own right, and together they are who I am.
And could you elaborate a bit what stands for each of these words in terms of the values, in terms of quality?
They complement each other. Being Israeli is, I mean, I was born here. I am first generation of my family to be Israeli born.
Okay.
I come from a family of immigrants, actually, not to say refugees from Europe. So being Israeli is both a privilege and a very heavy burden, and a very clear, for me, a very clear identity, which says something about my loyalties. I've never lived abroad. I didn't stay out of the land for longer than maybe 6 weeks. Went for two months. I'm utterly connected and committed to this impossible place. Very demanding, very challenging, loaded. I feel a lot of, the excitement of the loyalty, really.
Wow.
The pain that goes with it, together with I'm ready to carry this pain in order to keep it alive, being an Israeli. And I have to fight every morning. You asked about values. I feel abused and misused every day. When I open the newspaper, when I listen to the news, when I'm in touch with my real environment, it's difficult because there is too much going on that is not at all representing my values, and I feel almost helpless and still committed. So I would never dream of leaving, but it's a permanent fight. I always feel the dissonance when I'm abroad. And I notice that I don't care what's on the news, on the local news. It's not mine. And I'm not worried and I'm not concerned. And so being an Israeli is very defining who I am. And being a therapist is something that I realized I was from day one. I was born a therapist. It was my role. I was, I was doomed to be a therapist. Yeah, just this role was made for me. When I discovered it, I felt very happy. And being a Gestalt therapist, maybe this is the other polarity of being Israeli. Being a Gestalt therapist is being at home. It's something, if I'm not asked, I don't have to think about it. Sometimes I have to formalize, like now, formalize what it means to me. That's me. I feel that it is my, it's not a religion, because religions are dogmatic and demanding, but it is my being. It is my way of being in this world, of dealing with people, of taking care and being responsible. And I like it. It is very supportive for me. So
yeah, and
I don't know if I answered your question, but
yeah, very much. Thank you for this. I am with you now, and those. Yeah, the things that you mentioned, they are, how to put it, maybe, yeah, you partly answered that, but I wonder if there were any people in your life who would say that they had the biggest, the greatest influence on you, the greatest impact, or whether maybe circumstances or, yes. Once again?
professionally or personally?
No, generally.
In general,
Yeah, or situations maybe. Yeah.
people who were influential were definitely my paternal grandparents. I would say, well, I just realized when I said that, I realized that also my maternal grandparents were very influential in their absence. They were always present without mentioning them, hardly mentioning them. And they made their mark through my mother and also directly, because I had sort of an inner dialogue with them ever since I can remember myself. So they were influential mostly because they remained a secret and a lot of unknown. A lot of pain is connected with them. And so in a way, they were very influential too. While my parental grandparents were very important figures in my daily life, their presence in my life was, I just wrote something about them now. They were role models without having to say anything.
Wow.
I knew that I want to become something like them.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother was my symbol of independence, freedom, power, trust in her abilities. Nothing could stop her. She was 3 times a refugee, and she still kept her good spirits and trust in people and trust in her destiny, and the symbol of optimism and everything that's good and merry and beautiful and tasty and everything. Warm. And my grandfather was virtuous.
Mm-hmm.
He was committed to doing good, to volunteer, to seek who needs him, to be delegate for any purpose. He was simply a good person who always could be trusted, whose unconditioned love for me was, it was like breathing air. They were just there for me. So they were very influential. I had some wonderful teachers at school, really interesting and inspirational teachers. Even in elementary school, I still remember some of them. I always wanted to be a teacher, to become a teacher. This was my dream and ambition, and eventually I was a teacher most of my life, and still am in a way. So this is also part of my what was also influential was, of course, the circumstances of growing up as the firstborn child in the promised land, which my parents and grandparents have eventually reached and succeeded to establish themselves from scratch, really. And growing up in a very sheltered, protected environment, I don't think that they meant it to be. I don't know. They're not around, and I couldn't ask them. I wasn't clever enough to ask them while I could, if that was what they meant. But I realized how almost overprotected I was in my childhood when I joined the army at the age of 18. And I met with the reality that I didn't know existed. It was a cultural shock, and it was fascinating, and it was challenging in a very positive way. I loved every minute of my army service. I learned a lot, and I grew up, I matured, and I widened my horizon in a way that I simply didn't know anything. I grew up like in a golden cage, in a way.
Mhm.
So this encounter was very dramatic. From a schoolgirl,
Yeah.
I became, with no obligation and no serious responsibility, I became a soldier, a young person in charge, first of all, of other soldiers. But more important, I dealt with such important stuff. I was, I don't know how you call it, in charge of the office of the military chief censor.
Uh-huh.
And so the intelligence of
Mhm.
the army,
Mhm.
everything that was forbidden to publish
Mhm.
on the media and in general was on my desk. And I had to negotiate with newspaper editors and writers, and I had to be in contact with important figures, and it was fascinating and, you know, an eye-opener. And I remember before I parted there, my concern was, how in the world can I find a civil job that would be as interesting as that one? And for years, I kept in touch with the main figures, with the officers of that period. And of course, you know, the Israeli army is the biggest matchmaker.
Hmm.
That's where I met my husband. So I carried it with me for all the years. So it was a very influential event,
Mhm.
more than an event in my life. Um, of course, becoming a mother was a dramatic event, yet not as dramatic as I would think, because in a very strange way, for me, it was a continuation of a role that I already had. I have a sister who is 15 years younger,
Mhm.
and I was her second mother.
Mhm.
And I thought, naive me, I thought that I know everything about parenthood. I know everything about treating and taking care of children. There's nothing new. Turned out it was not so similar. Big sister and a parent is different. But I had a good preparation. I was not lost.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And I think the third, I don't know, third. Later, when I decided to start studying, and that was when I was a mother of four already, I discovered that I am able to study, that I developed, I started to be involved also in external affairs and not only in my family affairs. And it was a gradually maturing, like growing, until I came in touch with Gestalt. That I think was a crucial turning point.
But
Everything fell into place. Everything became meaningful.
Yeah, in fact, this is what I wanted to ask you later about how did you come to Gestalt, and yeah, but I am also, you know, fascinated by this army period, and just yeah, my curiosity, out of my curiosity, how long did it last, your service?
2 years. You know, it's a mandatory
Yeah.
phase.
Yes. Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah, I could actually, know it, but somehow, here in Europe, we both live in Europe actually. So but for some reasons I wasn't, I didn't realize until you said that. Yeah. Okay. And it's still mandatory in Israel. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, a school of life, really, I imagine.
In every way.
Yeah. Oh.
Yes.
Oh. Yeah. And before actually addressing this question about Gestalt, and you live now in where in Israel?
I live in a suburb of Tel Aviv.
Okay.
Not far from Tel Aviv. And I lived there for 48 years in the same apartment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but if you ask me where I'm from, I'm from Jerusalem.
Okay.
I was born in Jerusalem. And that's, I believe, is a stamp mark, you know.
Okay.
I feel that it's written on my forehead. There is something about Jerusalem that is, it has changed tremendously since the years that I was living there. I mean, I never came back after my army service because I got married and I stayed here. But growing up in Jerusalem in those years, I believe was very influential, formative.
And you said something about, I don't know whether I understood you right, but you are writing now something about...
No, I mentioned about my grandparents. I'm always writing something.
Of course.
And I'm always even more writing in my head.
Yeah.
And I'm sure sometimes that I have written it already. No, I didn't. I should, you know, should. I mentioned it because I said something about my paternal grandparents, of whom I mentioned their role in my life somewhere.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you anyway for, you know, sharing this ground with me, which is I appreciate simply. I've never been to Israel, but I live, I live in Poland, and it also has significance in this context. I live in Łódź. I don't know if you know. Yeah. and yeah, mm, mm, yeah, well, and yeah, and yeah, it is somehow full of different meanings and emotions and
Yeah.
mhm.
We have a lot in common in our communal history.
Mhm.
Many layers.
Mhm. Yeah. Just to acknowledge that now. And okay, so maybe and now getting to this this turning point. How did that happen?
How did that happen?
Yeah.
Like in all good stories, it happened just by chance. I didn't mean it to happen. This is something that I've written already, but I have to repeat it because it's the real story of Nurith and Gestalt. I was just graduating from my training in family therapy, which was wonderful, and it was very influential in many ways. And I was looking for a book as a present for one of my supervisors. And I saw, for some reason, I picked up a book. You know, the way you stand in a bookstore. I picked something up because of the cover, and it was the translation of Pearl's verbatim. I didn't know what a verbatim means. I never heard the name Pearls. I never, in my training, never heard the word Gestalt. Never. And I was trained as a social worker and as a family therapist. And I was in the academia for quite some time, never heard the name. And for no reason at all, I opened this book and I just leafed through it, and something caught my eye and my attention. And I was standing there like under a spell. I couldn't stop reading. So of course I bought it and went home and read it in one sitting because I was so excited. And I said, what is this? And where was it all my life? You know, like I found something that was mine. And digesting and chewing it, I started to realize that this is something that I have to make contact with in a more substantial way. So I started to look for it. And eventually I came across some information that led me to a person who became a very influential person in my life, Shraga Serok. I'm glad to have the opportunity to plant his name here. Okay. Shraga was my first, well, he was not even a trainer. He was not even my supervisor. He was leading a growth and development sort of group at the Tel Aviv University School of Social Work, which I joined. And it turned to be a good choice for me.
Wow.
So this is how I came to Gestalt.
Wow.
And ever since, I am doing what I used to do. I'm looking for opportunities to learn more and experience more and understand more and explore more of this treasure. I actually never had a proper training in Gestalt besides that 1 year participating in a group and then reading like I couldn't have enough. And that's it actually.
Yes, yes.
We were lucky through this person, Schlager. He was a graduate of the Cleveland Institute.
Mm-hmm.
And he had contacts with the pollsters and with Thinker and with the Resnicks. And they often came to give seminars or workshops. Then Les Wyman of the Cleveland Institute used to come to Israel every 6 months and gave workshops here. So this was my acquaintance with Gestalt.
And I wonder what were you at that moment the most attracted by within Gestalt theory, practice, and has that changed? Has that been changing throughout these years? This attraction, this object of attraction.
I think it has not been changing, but there is a movement of what's foreground and what is, going to the background, which is more integrated, and I don't have to think about. That comes almost naturally, and it is changing. It is changing. My circumstances and my interest is changing. What captured me is, I think, the permission to be myself. To accept who I am with all the weaknesses and difficulties. I was an extremely shy child who grew into an extremely shy woman. I had, it was not easy for me to be present, make myself present, to speak up, I was blushing, this terrible neurotic symptom of, I was always blushing. And something happened. We now know what happened. I grew out of it. It was my permission to rebel and to make my own person. I often think if my mother would see me today, if she saw the way that I brought up my children, if she saw my kitchen today, if she saw how I live, she wouldn't believe it. I had to make this move of separation, individuation, and it didn't happen until I was immersed in my Gestalt, becoming of the new me. And of course, the freedom and the wings that it gave me made me fall in love with it each time more.
Mm-hmm.
I can say that till this very day.
Mm. Yeah. Mm.
I wonder if I answer anything of what you're asking, but
Yes, yes, of
this
course.
take.
Yes, yes, yes. I don't want to, interrupt your flow, so to speak. I like it. It's like there is some rhythm in it, so I am, yeah, listening to the music. Yeah, and if you were to mention what have been throughout these years the specific domains of your active interest within Gestalt practice, within Gestalt theory, Gestalt community also.
With no doubt, two things that are one. I was fascinated by field theory and still am. And I am it's not happy, but not pleased, but I'm very satisfied about Gestalt being so much concerned and involved in the social and political sphere. Because I am a political animal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very involved and I care a lot, and it's very important to me. And to be a therapist who is completely devoted to clinical work, having in mind all the time the social, political, cultural environment that are parts that are such meaningful elements of the encounter of my patient and me, who come into being through our encounter and who play such an important part in the co-creation of what we are doing, the business of therapy, doing this without permission to take it all in and have it all on my mind would feel like probably working with one hand tied behind my back, it's so I really appreciate this gift. During the shutdown, when I was isolated, I had a lot of time to listen to lectures that were given by Zoom, on Zoom, I don't know how you say, by very interesting colleagues from other modalities. Among them, some of the leaders of psychoanalysis in Israel. And I was astonished to hear that they are still considering how much it is tainting their therapeutic work when they answer a patient to a question of how are you these days, or something like that, you know? The distance and the seclusion and the very artificial class division between therapist and patient is something that I understand it. I mean, it does not convince me. I couldn't work this way. I'm happy that I'm allowed to have a humane contact with my patient and to have the permission for, self-disclosure when it's fitting, and to use myself and to bring myself and to be there, present, caring, concerned, and everything. So this is something that I really cherish in our work. Besides the creativity and the fun and the humor and the usage of art in every way that I can think of, and playfulness. And I would say also there is something of basic human trust, and it's not optimism, but belief in the goodness of people. And bringing it up and looking for it and working with it. I think this is what I like.
You know what came to me now, listening to you, your grandparents, your parental grandparents, you know, when you started about this playfulness, I, you know, if I could, you know, somehow say something from my observations of you now, that, yeah, that indeed there is this a mixture of your grandfather and your grandmother in this, you know, kind of sense of responsibility and virtues, and at the same time warmth and playfulness and eagerness to
You just gave me a huge compliment.
Yeah, but really, yeah, I can receive. I am receiving you this way.
Yeah,
which is a nice gift for me this morning. When the week starts.
Thank you.
Yeah, just so. And one more thing, Nurith, what do you think? What do you see happening or will happen with Gestalt therapy in the future? Yeah.
I hope, I can only hope. It's a difficult and complicated question. because, you know, we are a minority. I think we are in a minority all over the world, in each country. And being a minority in this world where competition is won mostly through power and not through virtue is difficult. I can only say what I wish and what I hope. And it is like, it is now almost, it's not that I want to hide away from my responsibility, but it is almost the responsibility of the next generation of Gestalt to carry this gift to humanity, maybe in a more, convincing way than we did. I belong to the maybe third generation of Gestalt. I came across it in the late 80s.
Yeah.
And the development of Gestalt till now is mainly in establishing itself as a dignified modality among other psychotherapy modalities. And we are now well established, but not well enough. So I think that our community is doing a lot in terms of more of the same, and not in terms of breaking out new horizons, which I don't know. This is what I mean, remain for you to do. Like going into the atmosphere. I don't know how to do it. There is a lot of investment in research because our leaders have understood that we need to be evidence-based and be able to justify ourselves. There is a lot of investment going into regulation. I'm part of it in my role in EAGT. It is not the aim. It is maybe a good means to ascertain a certain quality level. What I really wish is for Gestalt to penetrate all the levels of education. This is where we need to make our mark. Because education today is about sciences, which are important, and not about humanity, not about values, about personal growth, not about moral. And, you know, during this period, it became openly clear, at least in my country, that the schools are actually there as babysitters. the educational aspect of school was maybe 10% in the consideration of how to deal with the schools. It was openly stated that schools need to be open because economies are collapsing and people need to go
Yes.
able to leave their children. So I pray that our successors will find a way to really introduce Gestalt into the educational system and bring our values there. Because you can learn today everything on the internet. You don't need to go to school. Whatever you want, you can find there. You cannot learn to become a social person, a caring person. You cannot learn to respect your feelings and be empathic to others without the real encounter. Mm-hmm. And this is something that Gestalt can do big way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And which is not really like, how to put it, which is likely to happen. I mean, it is not such a wish that, too far-fetched. I mean, yeah.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
It isn't.
Oh, okay. Nurith, thank you. Thank you. And also for this last answer. Now on behalf of my generation also, in a way, we are asking this question for many reasons, but also, it is very somehow vital for me to listen to what older generations, our teachers, trainers have in mind.
I really appreciate what you're doing, creating sort of a oral history, biography of Gestalt.
Yeah, this is.
I think the putting together all the aspects is really very a huge contribution.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for your participation in it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. So goodbye.
Goodbye.
And see you one day. Yeah.
Someday.
Bye.
Ciao. Bye.